Are you ready to tell us what you're building and receive some feedback?
Sure, let's do it.
I'm building invoiceledger.com.
My name is Mark Colton, and I'm CEO at Aviation.
I'm building Dexo, an autonomous sales code.
The thing that I loved is the headline.
Less is more.
I won't accept these invoices.
You don't have to accept that invoice. I think what you just answered was phenomenal.
Hey there, welcome to episode 15 of The Feedback Loop, the show where every week startup founders get up on stage in front of a live audience in New York City and then give the 1-minute pitch for their startup and their vision of the future. And then they receive unfiltered feedback from two real investors about both their concept and their storytelling, all with the goal of helping push them forward in their startup journey. Each founder gets 1 minute to give their pitch, no slides, no deck, no demos. It's just the essence of the story. Then it's 5 to 10 minutes of questions and feedback, alongside some game-changing advice about how they can give that pitch moving forward to better sell their product or service, recruit team members, and raise venture capital. With that in mind, let's go to intros. Hope you enjoy the show. I'm Virginie. I'm the founder and CEO of FirstGen. We're a venture-backed startup ourselves, Hollywood-style representation for tech talent. That's the only shilling I'll do, but also an occasional angel investor, and super excited to have been hosting the Feedback Loop for the past several months. I feel now it is an essential part of my being as well. So I'm one of the people who will be giving the essential feedback to the founders as we go. And joining me today is a longtime friend and colleague in the world of the startup ecosystem, not literally, but we've done so much together that I think it's essential. So Matt Kaliski is principal at Acronym Venture Capital, is founder of FirstGen. We're going to get to what those two things are in a moment here, but a supporter of founders. We've hosted many events together, supporting the startup ecosystem, the founder ecosystem, and I want to get to a few of these different pieces here in a moment. But we're like a few days from July 4th, and you are the founder of FirstGen, which we're going to get to in a second here. But so essential to Matt's story, my story, and I think kind of the narrative of the Valley lately is the immigrant story. Why do you do what you do, and lead that into the story of FirstGen?
First of all, thank you for having me here. But as you were saying, that immigrant story is just something that has been so important to me, and an honor to what my parents have done for me. And speaking to what the American dream is, as someone that moved to the U.S., grew up on free and reduced lunch, and now I get to be talking and investing in amazing startups of people building the future. So that to me is the essence of what's possible here. And my MO over the past few years has become, how can we allow more immigrants and children of immigrants to kind of pursue their passion, and kind of help them in some of the softer things that we're going to be talking about today, right? I think one of the panels that we did a few months back, one of the investors said, like, the essence of being a founder, not only in fundraising but also in pitching and selling, is being able to tell a story, right? And I think particularly in my neck of the wood, where I spend a lot of my free time helping immigrants and children of immigrants, that idea of storytelling doesn't really get taught, right? And I think one of the things that we're always told is that, hey, put your head down and money will follow. But we never actually end up learning about how to tell about what we can do or what we have done, which then kind of starts this spiral of feeling like we always have to overprove ourselves, because no one gives us the opportunity to kind of, do what we say we can do. But a lot of what you're doing here, I think, is spot on with like helping us tell the story. And I think that carries with any founder, not just an immigrant, but you got to be able to tell your story in 60 seconds, whether it's a pitch, why you're working on this, why you're going to hire someone, why someone should buy your product. Like, all of that is so essential, but it's also so hard to distill into a short 60-second bite.
Something that I don't think you've heard me talk about, but it was one of the reasons that when you started FirstGen, it just so resonated with me. For agency, we think about people's careers a lot, and usually that's non-founders, but obviously a lot of the community stuff we do is around founders. And the thing that I tell people is, what has always bugged me my entire career being in job search and recruiting, I don't like information and process asymmetries that hold people back. And everything you talk about there, right, is an information or process asymmetry, sometimes small, sometimes large, that is holding someone back from some larger ambition. So that's why I've always been number one fan of FirstGen and what you're doing there. Before we get, kind of into the pitches, let's briefly also just tell us about Acronym and what you're doing there and what the team's doing there.
Yes. So we specialize in investing post-seed but pre-A. So companies that have raised a seed, have early but not quite repeatable execution. And we work with them to help them usually get from like 1 million to 5 million in revenue, investing across B2B and omni-channel consumer brands. So as a fund, we can lead, co-lead, or follow. I think we've made 14 investments, of which we've led 7 or 8. So very active on the board, helping companies get into that next stage where a larger, better VC can come in and just underwrite all the great work that the founders have done to that date.
I like it because, with FirstGen, you're helping, some of these founders get from that 0 to million, and then you're investing to help people get million to 5 and 5 to 10. So there's this kind of throughput in a lot of what you do.
But because, the founder challenges change depending on the stage, right? Like your journey evolves, right? So it's not like from 0 to 100 is the same journey, right? There's like very specific peaks and valleys that you have to go through.
Phases of life.
Yeah.
So, no further ado, shall we?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Round of applause for our first founder up. What's your name?
My name is Joanna. Nice to meet you.
Joanna, nice to meet you. Are you ready to tell us what you're building and receive some feedback?
Sure, let's do it.
You have a minute. What are you building?
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm building Dexo, an autonomous sales coach that helps reps develop their pitches, their handling objections, soft skills overall, because I truly believe that these are the skills that can differentiate the average from the best. This is the type of skills I've helped teams develop for the last years. And we launched last June. So we got here with 200K. We achieved 330K in ARR. And on average, our clients are seeing 30% shorter sales cycles. So we know this works. We're actually now committed for our seed round, which is our next biggest milestone. And we have a team passionate, full of immigrants, because that's what we know how to do best, just grind and add value. And we're starting with sales. This is a 23 billion market for underserved industries like manufacturing, logistics. But the world for us is much more than sales. So this is just a snapshot of what we're working on today. And I'm ready for your feedback. Thank you.
Well done. Under a minute.
Less is more.
Less is more. That's true. The thing that I loved is the headline. And a lot of founders actually struggle with the headline. So you have a great headline. I understand who you're targeting. I understand why you're targeting them. But in your space, I think there are a lot of competitors. And so what I'm really curious about, and let's get into a little bit, is what you're really building. I'm always now known as the person who wants to know about the UX of these pitches and or these startups almost immediately. Let's dive into the UX. What's the literal journey when someone's using the product?
First of all, to your point, it is a competitive space, which is why we're tackling a wide space of non-B2B SaaS. And how we do it is we take external data, being sales experts we work with, and internal data, being the client's CRM, the client's LMS, which is why it can be in the flow of work through a Chrome extension. So you're on someone's profile. Let's say you're about to talk to Matt. It says, hey, make sure you speak, high level, don't talk details, and let's practice. So you really get the most accurate real-time sales coach you can do, and micro-learning so that it can actually stay.
Is that text-based? Is that voice-based, video-based?
Both. Chat and video, yes.
Chat and video. And when you talk about coaching in that moment, that's to prep them prior to a specific call, or is this like...
Throughout the entire sales cycle, whether you're doing a discovery call, after the call, you're negotiating the pricing, you're doing a renewal. So no matter what's your goal, it can get personalized according to that, to help you based on what you do great and what you're missing out through the practice. So you have basically your sales coach next to you 24/7.
And what is your background in this space?
So I was a VP of People and Chief of Staff for Aptivio, which is a revenue AI, a Series A stage startup here in New York for 2 years prior to founding Dexo. And that's where I saw all the issues with sales enablement, because sales leaders really want their teams to be ready and not practice in front of the client, but they don't have the time for one-on-one coaching.
That's your pitch.
That's a really good line. Especially to your point of asking where the credibility comes from, right? When you said chief of staff and head of people, okay, what am I thinking? It's like you've seen where these leaders fail. You've seen where they probably come to you for support. They probably come to the chief of staff. They come to the head of people and say, what resources can you develop? You mentioned an LMS as part of your pitch several times. And I didn't wonder why, because it made sense to me that, as part of sales enablement in LMS is often, something, but you have a very specific point of view based on your past positions that I think needs to be part of like the credibility that you build into your product.
Yeah, I always say, like, when I coach or talk to founders at this stage, at the end of the day, investors are going to believe or not, in your vision of the world and in your ability to execute on that vision of the world. And I think in the middle of the pitch, it was kind of hard for me to follow when you started throwing out all these different like market size numbers, which I don't think you need to do in a pitch. You need to hook me emotionally in order to have that conversation. So, I think what you just answered was phenomenal about, what is that pain point that you saw? What is happening in the market? What is your hypothesis on wanting to change, and what have you been able to do, right? So the fact that you had, traction, that's great, all that kind of stuff. For me, that's kind of like the cherry on top. You got to hook me more with what you know, what you've experienced, and why what you're doing is working. And then give me a little bit of information as to like how and how well it's going, so that I want to have that full conversation later on.
I'll just add to that and say, like, one of the reasons that'll work really nicely, especially for a competitive space like this, because so many people are doing the AI time sales enablement, kind of concept, is because then it gives people like me and Matt a sense of what does 5 years look like? What does 10 years look like? Because your more practical version of your pitch tells us what the product is today, but your vision, your point of view will direct how your product differentiates as foundational models get better, as, a lot of other products enter the space and kind of tackle all of this. But that's maybe, one more question for you while I have you on stage. When you think about the next 5 years, right? What does this product turn into for you?
So in 5 years, that's why I actually started with the market by saying that this is like the market if we focus on sales. Our 5-year plan is to expand and really be the autonomous coach overall for soft skills. So helping people become better in communication, collaboration, negotiation, all the skills that you also help founders develop by truly tapping into the organization's intelligence and the individual's capabilities. So kind of like Siri is your go-to for everything, we will be your go-to for soft skills, for human connection.
I didn't get any of that from that initial pitch, right? And I feel like the past couple of questions really uncovered a lot more that you were able to talk about. And to reiterate my previous point, like, you don't need to throw out like ARR, like market size numbers, because that's like either someone's going to believe in your ability to create a autonomous coach for soft skills within the realm of like enterprise or sales, or they're not.
Can I add like a founder's perspective here?
Go for it.
Because first of all, I love the feedback and thank you. And I agree with that. However, when you pitch a lot of investors, most of them have told me that, hey, I don't really care so much to see the founder slide first, because it's not that you have had like past exits and stuff. So I think as a founder, you also try to put in front what matters. And for instance, I haven't pitched you before, right? Like, I don't know if you care about the numbers or not, but most of the times I get the opposite. So it's very interesting to see the reverse.
I think it's like, right, it's a story. Like, what story are you telling? And if you're a founder creating something, I would rather have you a very strong opinion on what you're doing and why. And I think that needs to come across, right?
Very brief story about this. So raising our Series A in 2021, we were struggling the first few months. I was trying to institute all the feedback I got. This is what the investors are going to care about. And this slide, your CAC to LTV ratio seems unreal, and that's going to throw people off and whatever. I was integrating all this feedback and it wasn't going well. And I was like, what's going on? Like, I can't figure this out. And then it led to this knockout phone call with, I'm finally going to name him because I've referred to this investor over and over again, Roy Bahad, who's not our investor at Bloomberg Beta, but one of the partners at Bloomberg Beta. Karen Klein is our investor at the firm. And there's this call where I really disagreed with how he wanted me to change the slide. And he wasn't the only one giving me advice that I disagreed with, but he was the one where he's willing to like fight. So we got into a little bit of a fight. And I remember reflecting afterwards, and he kind of had me have this moment of like, I'm done with all these people, whether it's Roy or everybody else, and it's not just him. And I changed the deck back to kind of what I had originally written when we started that Series A process, and stayed true to that story. And like, what am I trying to build? Why am I trying to build it? What do I think the future looks like when it comes to free agency? And within weeks, we had our Series A, we had multiple partner meetings, we chose a firm rather than having to, kind of just pick for what we settled for. So it's common, right? What you're going through of like, okay, am I saying the right thing? And people want to reorder your deck and all this other stuff. So know that you're not alone in going through that. My almost universal advice to founders is to embrace what they think is the right answer. It's hard to do because you're going to feel like, oh, is this what's killing me? Is this what's getting me no's? And probably not. Probably something else is getting you no's, and your core story is going to be what wins people over. But good job. Thanks for sharing your story. I still think there's this thing that I don't know about. This space is very competitive, but I like the chief of staff background and the head of people background because in particular, I think sales enablement, it's underrated how those functions are about the people and about saying, how do we educate the organization about our products? How do we keep them up to date as the products get updated? How do we allow salespeople to understand what resources in the organization to tap into if we've got a demo coming up or a client meeting coming up? That is less a sales function, sales enablement, than it is a people function when it's doing what it's supposed to do.
Especially if she's successful in that longer 5-year vision, which really is about people,
right?
Not so much sales enablement. So once
the soft skills,
the soft skills, right? So like once I think we were able to spend a little more time learning about what the plan actually is, I think that is enough to have me to want a second conversation following to learn more.
Yeah, 100% agree. Awesome. All right. Well, with that, let's bring up our second pitch. All right. Hello.
Hi.
What's your name?
Iman.
Iman, are you ready to tell us what you're building and receive some feedback?
Yeah.
Awesome. You have a minute. What are you building?
I'm building invoiceledger.com. You can think of it something like Visa or MasterCard, but for invoices with credit bureau element to it. So the main problem we're trying to solve is late payments in B2B industry. Because you guys in B2B, you know how painful it is to chase clients for that invoice. And there are two main reasons why invoices are being paid late. First is misalignment of processes, because there are hundreds of accounts receivable platforms, hundreds of account payable platforms on each side. But once you send out that invoice to your client, you have no visibility of what's happening with that invoice on the other side. These platforms don't communicate with each other. And the main reason actually why invoices are not paid on time is because there is no good reason for the client to pay on time. Because there's no payment accountability. It's easy to stretch friendly reminders. It's like free capital at the expense of your supplier. And if they pay on time, there's like no essentially credit, good credit history that they can leverage to get better terms across the board from other suppliers. And that's the gap we're trying to close. So we're optimizing for the last mile of the invoice.
That's a minute. Round of applause to the founder, though. Good job.
Thanks.
I really like this problem. And I think like there's a line that I particularly love as a starting point. It was something like, there's no good reason for people to pay their invoices on time. I don't love the middle where you like rushed yourself to be like, these processes are happening in chaos and blah, blah, blah. True. But if you're selling to anybody who's going to invest in you, they know that, right? Like that's almost bought in is like, if they care to talk to something called Invoice Ledger, they already know bills are not getting paid, invoices are a mess. And it's the delightful lines like, and there's no good reason for anyone to pay them on time that then gets me that emotional hook that you were talking about. It's like, now I want to hear more.
Right. I think you did a good job in like the first third. The second third kind of felt rushed, and it felt like there was a lot of things that were trying to be said in a very short amount of time. And I think there was not really a good closing hook to how you're going to do what you're doing because you were trying to say so much in so little time.
Yeah.
But I think like it was a very interesting way of like presenting the problem. I agree with you. Just kind of like those quick one-liners, right? They're kind of like that thing that's going to resonate with me. One thing that I don't particularly like myself is the X for Y startup, because I probably spent the first 10 seconds trying to, in my head, figure out what that intersection is. So you kind of lost me for a little bit. But overall, I thought
what was the X for Y? I don't even remember it.
Visa for invoices.
Let's dig into that. Why do you use that analogy?
Visa like connects all the banks and their credit card ecosystems to communicate to each other, and we kind of do that the same thing for the accounts receivables, accounts payables platforms.
So what is the product literally?
So you can think of it something like a invoice payment link. But with like invoice portal where clients on the other side can manage their invoice
Clients can manage the invoices they've
clients
received.
Can you say
yes.
can you say invoices fewer times because it's hard to like follow?
Sure.
And I think the thing here, right? It's like, is the invoice the thing?
No, we already take the invoice once it's received, once it's issued, and help to route it to the client to make sure it was received properly by the client on that side, and communicate everything that can potentially delay the invoice payment on time. It was like received properly? Do they need payment extension? Do they need financing options? Is there like a dispute deductions with that invoice?
So are you just trying to make sure that the person who's supposed to be paying the invoice actually sees the invoice?
So we're optimizing that the clients don't have any excuse to pay that invoice before the due date. And if they still miss the due date, we keep track of payment accountability. So essentially, the credit bureau.
What is accountability?
Essentially, we help to report that to existing credit bureaus and also build our own score on top of that.
To me, the kind of like, this is like a bad analogy, but it's like when a founder sends me a deck and they put it into DocSend.
So they can see how many times you opened it.
They've opened the deck.
But now you said you're reporting it. So you're reporting it to credit bureaus and you're creating your own credit score, essentially. Do I want that as like the recipient of these invoices?
That's why you would pay on time.
So you want that as a supplier.
Will I accept these? I won't accept these invoices.
You don't have to accept that invoice, like because
oh boy, so this is like a one-way platform.
So it's not necessarily, it's like we give actually an optionality to address the like any issues with that invoice. Like there's been deductions or disputes with that invoice. We give you like options to get request payment extension or financing options. Essentially, we give you all the options that you can like communicate the reasons if you're the client. But in the end, we're just keeping track of payment accountability on behalf of the supplier.
Is this for a particular industry? Like, is it like actual goods or like who would be using this?
So a lot of industries suffer from late payments, but we decided to focus on the suppliers, wholesalers to like food establishments here in New York.
And why did you choose that?
Because for our score to make sense, we need like a good penetration in one vertical, one area. And there are like 25,000 food establishments here in New York. There are only a couple of hundred suppliers, and they all deal with from like small restaurants to like large restaurants, and they have all their own payment patterns, how they decide to pay their invoices and what pays what rate.
I think one of the things I'm experiencing here is we're learning a few too many things throughout the journey of this pitch, and like the thing that I want for you is to like find that first central hook tagline and then find a central way to tell the rest of the story. Because like I feel like I skipped the visa analogy entirely. I didn't realize as much until you got into it more how much you were doing on the scoring side and like essentially and this is my worry for you, is like punishing people who are the recipients of these invoices, whether or not like they'll be accepting of it is kind of like a similar thing to a DocSend. Maybe they have to. But I want you to tell that story from the top, because essentially what that sounds like, or if I kind of echo that back to you, there is no incentive to pay an invoice on time, and we're building a platform that bakes those incentives into the invoice in the client portal. And unlike every other platform, it's not just an accounting tool, it's not just a ledger, it's also a record of how late you are with other clients and invoices that you have, how many times you had to request a payment extension. It's a credit score. It's a somewhat of a credit karma comparison more than it is a visa comparison, infused into an invoicing system. Is there a reason it has to be its own invoicing system as opposed to latched on top of other?
No, we latch on top of it. Like we're not our like own invoicing system.
Oh, got it. But then can I use it with whatever invoicing system I use?
That's the intent use of it.
Interesting. Okay.
I think there's a lot here. I just think it was packaged incorrectly. And I think sometimes if like for something like this, it's probably better to say less than more, because then we got confused. And the other reason why I think the pitch and the story is so important, because the last thing you want to do in a meeting is what happens here. You're on the defense, right? So you need to really kind of reframe and make it a bit shorter so that we can have a conversation and move forward, versus being confused and ask the questions. But I think you have something that's very interesting. Let's just find a way to get that more so you don't have to defend yourself.
In other words, super, super interesting ingredients. And we want to put together a little bit more of a clean plate. But well done. Congratulations.
Thanks. Thank you, guys.
Right? So I think there's like potential for something very interesting.
Yeah. Well, and that's where I think the hard part is, right? It's not just the pitch in this case, it's also the product. So this is where, a lot of these are early stage companies, and it's as much as a lot of it is about the pitch, a lot of it's also about, hey, what are you going to go to your market with and say is the first thing you should buy? Are you buying the accountability? Are you buying the ease of seeing how late people are and sending them reminders? Are you buying the idea of a bunch of individuals having a grade essentially on the other side? There's so much that could be part of this product. And
Like,
so
what's the wedge?
Exactly.
And how do you expand that wedge into a full company?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Especially for you building in B2B SaaS, what you want to know essentially is, okay, there's going to be a competitor here. How is your go-to-market going to allow you to, land grab essentially before they come out?
That's why I was curious as to, why food service or restaurants.
Yeah.
Right? Is it like a personal connection? Is it a professional connection that allows you to know that market more than others? So that initial go-to-market motion, that initial wedge is more defensible.
Yeah.
Than a bunch of, people graduating from business school that are trying to replicate this.
Yeah, totally. All right, shall we do our next one?
Yes, please.
A round of applause for founder 3. All right, hello.
Hi.
Lights are bright, right? What's your name?
Mark.
Mark?
Yes.
Nice to meet you. Are you ready to tell us what you're building and receive some feedback? Yes. You have a minute. What are you building?
Okay. The cost of wildfires in the US only is between 400 to 900 billion of dollars. My name is Mark Colton, and I'm CEO at Aviation, a UAV startup company developing a vertical takeoff and landing UAV system for operation in civilian airspace, intended for public safety applications such as firefighting, border patrol, and search and rescue missions. During the last 3 years, we performed services in the UAV domain, generating about $1 million in sales. The profits from the sales enable us, together with pre-seed funding from our partners, to perform preliminary development of the system and technological validation and in-depth research of the market. We are looking to fundraise $5 million in order to complete the development of the system and to start performing demonstrations to the customers.
Under a minute. Good job. Thanks. I'm very intrigued. I think a very clear description. I think there are some things that I'm going to give as honest, feedback about communication and like how to improve. You have a strong accent, and there's going to be things that I think are hopefully helpful to you that I'm going to recommend. So there's some stuff where I had to be 20 seconds in before I understood what was going on. But once I did understand what was going on, made sense from a product perspective, from a what specific market he's serving perspective, civilian. The one thing that I'd say doesn't bring it, kind of lift it for me is I want to know more about this business model. Intriguing that there's this early success and this desire for what it sounds like more research and development around the product. That feels a little vague to me.
I think it's maybe because I'm a little further away. It was hard to understand what you were saying. So I just didn't catch some of that. So that could have been maybe part of it. There are resources that I can connect you with that can kind of help you work on the pitch. And I would love to, like in that pitch, understand more of what you're trying to do. I didn't feel like I got the bigger vision for what the product or what the company is, especially because you are building a technically difficult product. If I remember, it's like a vertical takeoff, right, for fire or
firefighting.
Yeah, for firefighting. Yeah. So that's super specific and very highly technical. So I think in this pitch, I think I would actually like to understand, like, do you have the background, the technical skills to be able to accomplish something like this?
Okay, thank you.
Two things just quickly on, kind of the harder part of feedback here that is, not as easily in control. When folks have either a strong accent or, difficulty communicating more natively, I recommend first practice the pitch with folks where you bring some of the simpler stuff up front faster. So the vertical takeoff and landing, as soon as you said that, I heard and understood like a lot of your pitch a lot better. You said UAV at some point. If you bring me to understanding and being with you a little bit earlier in the pitch, because then even if I'm waiting for you to finish or I want to ask you clarifying questions, I'm with you on the overall concept earlier in that pitch journey. So that's one thing I recommend, in general. The second thing is emphasis points in storytelling. I recommend this to job seekers a lot too when they're telling their personal pitch. Use moments to get louder So you're going to have these beats to your story. You're going to have a rhythm to what you talk about. You can hear how I'm doing in my voice, and that's going to allow you to, on words that are more complicated, end of sentences, things of that nature. But this is just something you can practice, right? This is not like a weakness fundamentally. This is just practice that you're going to definitely get over time. So let's get into the product a little bit. I have the same question Matt does. What is the long term of the company? Are you a drones company? Are you a manned vehicle company? What are you in the future? What are you trying to build fundamentally?
So our company started as a service company. So we are working with leading companies in the UAV domain, providing
What sort of services?
Developing systems, certifying systems, flight testing.
Systems being
UAV systems.
So like the literal
Unmanned
products.
vehicles of all kinds, VTOLs, fixed wing.
This is super important for you to know. Be more specific when you say services, because that could mean a bunch of things. It could mean you help them acquire them, you help them sell them, you help them maintain.
Yeah.
But now when you say you're dealing in the product,
engineering and
engineering services,
operating services.
Yeah, perfect.
And our goal is to become a product company. That means developing our own UAV system and to become a major
Why
player.
did you just
So let me ask, like, what makes you think that you'll be better at creating these systems or these like flight systems than people who have been doing this for years?
The company was founded by 3 guys, and I joined them as a late founder. And all of us coming with a background in development of unmanned vehicles and systems. And each of one of us coming with a different background. One is a pilot, a UAV pilot. Another one is a manager and business development. Another one is engineering. And the first one is operating. Relatively to other startups, we are a startup that is already developing systems, and we have a background and experience in developing systems as each one of us individually. So our innovative idea is developing a mid-sized VTOL. It's a 150 kilograms maximum takeoff weight, which is different from most of the UAVs flying today, especially in the US. And we're going to certify it to civilian airspace, to civilian standards. This is the uniqueness of that. And today there are no vertical
Can you say
takeoff
that
and landing.
differently? One of the things what you just said doesn't interest me, but here's what I'm guessing would interest me. Does the category of payload and height and all of these things, does it have a more easily identifiable gap in the market? As an example, if you said what you should know, and I know this because I've been we're an engineering services and operational services businesses for unmanned, for UAVs and VTOLs. And we know that firefighters and XYZ other 2 categories you can name currently don't have a solution in this space. We know this because we serve these companies every day, and we see there are certain missions that they cannot take on because these vehicles can't do this and that. And realizing this, that was the inspiration for our company. There are a bunch of underserved markets in this space, and we know that governments, agencies, whatever else is kind of the typical customer, would immediately buy and immediately support a company that was focused on this use case. Because then you're identifying it not as specification, because specifications to me and to Matt, we have no idea why that's important. But if you then use use case to wrap around it, then it goes, oh yeah, sure, use cases I get. So is there a use case you can wrap around the gap in the market?
So the use case I started, basically we are developing a system that is agnostic to the different use cases, but the use case we are focusing is firefighting. Basically, we can enable long endurance missions doing early detection of fires. So basically, in order to be able to send a ranger or a firefighting vehicle, instead of sending extinguishing jet to extinguish the fire.
Is your background technical or
Yes.
business oriented?
So I'm 20 years as a technical manager, engineer, and so on, and a couple of years in business development. So mostly technical, yes.
Yeah, because you're still selling me specs, not the problem that you're solving.
I want to latch onto a story, right? Like this seems like a cool product. Part of me wants to go, yes, right? But the hard part is, why would I'm not getting a reason that I know, as someone who's not an expert in the space, that there's an obvious gap. There's stuff you're saying, and I go, oh, does a long endurance UAV exist today to do this? What would a firefighting team really want? Is this a good replacement for an extinguisher jet? And I don't know these things. And so somewhat your problem is maybe customer education along the way, where a more narrative-based version of this story says, here's what's missing thematically, less than specifically. You might get a lot more legs out of that.
I would just say probably most of the investors that you'll be pitching will be like Shervin and I, where we won't have the domain experience or the technical experience. So you have to find a way to bring that problem home for us to resonate with it, to give you the time to like do a full pitch.
Good job, though.
Yeah.
Good
Thank
job.
you very much.
Congratulations. It all comes down to that problem, right? Like when someone is that technical and is so expert in the space, there's the part of your brain that goes, there must be something here, right? If this person sees it, they're so in the weeds, there must be some gap here, and there must be some gap that this person is capable or their team is capable of filling. But
you and I
less
have
certain.
seen so many great technical minds build products that
Right.
no one needs.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. I'm
And
not saying
the fear.
that's the case
That's
here,
the fear, yeah.
but without knowing what the problem or the use case or the demand for this could be, right? I mean, I think the firefighting use case is really interesting, right? Because I didn't know this, but like I didn't know New Mexico had wildfires, but they've
Right.
been burning like crazy.
Right.
Right. And I think you can bring that home
Yes,
with
bring that
so
narrative
many
in.
different homes. Like, hey, like the wildfires are increasing everywhere. We're seeing it with like the typical suspects, but also increasingly in places where we didn't expect it to be. So I think there's like a way to bring that into a more digestible and relatable form, which at the end of the day, I think we all need to be able to do when we talk to investors.
And as you pointed out with the first pitch, right, it's the emotional hook. You need that emotional hook in the beginning.